Last month, my family disowned me over a $20,000 cruise I refused to pay for. That's how I'd sum it up in a single, bitter breath if you ask me now. My name is Ellen, a 30-year-old accountant in Seattle, and I have spent the better part of the last decade scrimping and saving every penny I could muster. Every month, I dropped a little extra cash into my dream apartment fund, a battered glass jar that sat proudly on my desk at work. That jar and its humble contents were my lifeline, a promise of independence that I finally achieved when I purchased my very first apartment in this rainy, vibrant city. I thought I had earned my place in the world, but nothing could have prepared me for the family dinner that would shatter my illusions of unconditional love. It all began on a chilly Friday evening when I received a text from my parents inviting me to dinner at our old family home in Seattle's Capitol Hill district. The message was curt and devoid of the usual warmth. I knew something was off when my mom's name glowed on the screen with a string of exclamation points that seemed almost desperate. Arriving at the house, I was greeted by the familiar scent of cinnamon and bread, an aroma that had once wrapped me in comfort, but tonight it mixed with a sense of impending conflict. Inside the dining room, the table had been set with meticulous care, polished silverware, gleaming plates, and a vase of freshly cut peonies that seemed to fight the gloomy Seattle sky outside with their cheerful vibrancy. I took my seat across from my parents, determined to keep my cool. My father, a proud but stern man who preferred numbers to emotions, gave me a tight, evaluating look over his bifocals. My mother, usually the heart of the home, barely smiled as she fussed over last-minute adjustments. I knew instantly from the strained air that tonight would be anything but ordinary. Before I could even settle in with a polite greeting, the door swung open, and in walked my younger sister, Chloe. The shock wasn't just in her sudden appearance. After all, Chloe had been away for a while, but in the way she carried herself. Her usually effervescent charm was replaced by a deflated demeanor, weighed down by a recent divorce that had become the talk of our little family. Chloe had always been the wild one, the free spirit who danced to her own tune, even if her tune sometimes led to reckless decisions that left her drowning in debt. Now, as she slumped into the seat beside me, it was painfully clear that those reckless days had taken a toll. My mother wasted no time in getting to the point. "Ellen," she began sharply, "we need to talk about Chloe." Her voice was measured, but laced with an unmistakable edge of urgency. I braced myself. I'd heard whispers about Chloe's latest misadventure, a European cruise costing $20,000 that she claimed was essential for her emotional recovery after her divorce. A cruise. As if all her problems could be magically soothed by a lavish trip across the frothy waters of the Atlantic. I suppressed a scoff. My father added, in his dry, no-nonsense tone, "We've discussed this already. It is only fair that you, who have always been the responsible one, help fund this trip for Chloe. She's suffered enough, and it's time for her to start healing, returning to the family's grace, if you will." I could feel my cheeks flare red, not just from anger but humiliation. Here I was, working tirelessly, budgeting every expense, and finally buying my own apartment, a symbol of my independence, only to be guilted into financing Chloe's escapade. I leaned forward, clearing my throat to steady my voice. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but I can't do that." I watched as my parents' expressions shifted from expectation to disbelief. A heavy silence fell over the table as every eye bore into mine. I could almost hear the clatter of my own heartbeat in that charged moment. I've worked hard to save my money and build a future for myself. I spent years sacrificing little luxuries to afford my own apartment. I am not going to squander that on a vacation you expect me to pay for, especially when it's not even my problem. My words, though measured, sparked an immediate explosion at the table. My mother's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. "How dare you, Ellen?" she hissed, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and sorrow. "Chloe is your sister. Family comes first, and if you truly cared about your family's well-being, you would help her in her time of need. My father shook his head slowly, as if disappointed beyond repair. You're so selfish, Ellen. You have a responsibility. Our family has always supported each other, and now you're betraying that trust. The tone of his words stung like a slap, a reminder that all my years of careful saving supposedly came at the cost of family disapproval. I sat back, letting the silence engulf me as I considered the irony of it all. A family that prided itself on togetherness, now demanding that I sacrifice my hard-won independence for Chloe's reckless whims. I wondered if they had ever even heard of the concept of personal boundaries. The situation felt surreal and bitterly absurd. In that moment, my mind flashed to the savings jar on my desk, a small, unassuming vessel that had grown into a fortress of security through years of careful diligence. It was not just money. It was my symbol of independence and self-respect. I knew I had to stand my ground, no matter how much it hurt. I'm sorry, but I can't help fund a cruise that has nothing to do with my responsibilities, I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. I could sense that I had crossed a line, and so did they. The atmosphere at the table turned even colder, the peonies on the table now seeming mocking in their brightness. My sister, Chloe, remained silent for a while, her eyes darting between my parents and me, as though searching for some sign of remorse on my face. The exchange escalated quickly from there. Tempers flared, resentments long held began to surface, and every word exchanged felt like a small betrayal. I could feel the weight of every sacrifice I'd made over the years, all of which seemed to vanish in the glare of their expectations. Finally, as the argument reached its peak, my phone vibrated, an incoming text message from my mother, which I hesitantly checked. The message was curt, cold, and final. If you don't help Chloe, don't bother coming back. That single message, terse and full of unyielding disappointment, sliced through any remaining hope of reconciliation. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the screen, suddenly feeling more alone than I ever had before. I knew that nothing I said or did would change their minds. Instead, I was being forced to choose between my hard-fought independence and family loyalty, a choice that felt like a betrayal of my very self. As I sat there in the oppressive silence of the dining room, the rain tapping relentlessly against the windows and echoing the rhythm of my racing heart, I couldn't help but wonder, had my family ever truly valued me for who I was, or was I just the bank to be tapped whenever they needed to patch up their own reckless choices? The question weighed on me like the gray Seattle sky, heavy and unyielding. The taste of betrayal was bitter, and I felt like the only responsible person in a family governed by selfish need and manipulation. I gathered my things slowly, each movement deliberate, as I tried to shield my emotions from the prying eyes of my family. That night, as I walked away from the house under the drizzly Seattle skies, I felt an unfamiliar yet liberating sensation, the dawning of a new chapter where I would no longer be taken for granted. But as the family home disappeared behind me, I knew that the fallout from tonight's dinner was only just beginning. I had taken a stand, and there was no going back. The cold truth was out there now, and I was left to face the consequences on my own. What would come next? Would I be forever severed from the only people I'd ever known, or would the tides of time reveal that my choice was the only path to true freedom? If you don't help Chloe, don't bother coming back. The rain hadn't let up since I left my parents' house that evening. I walked through Seattle's slick, neon-lit streets feeling equal parts liberated and terribly alone. Every puddle reflected a distorted image of my newly formed reality, a reality where I stood up for myself despite the searing pain of rejection. My mother's text still burned on my phone screen. If you don't help Chloe, don't bother coming back. It felt like both a curse and a twisted declaration of independence. I clutched my phone tighter as I navigated the damp sidewalks, thinking about the countless nights I'd spent saving every spare cent in my trusty little savings jar. That jar, chipped yet steadfast, now symbolized my hard-earned independence and the future I was determined to build in my modest new apartment. When I finally reached my apartment in a quiet neighborhood tucked away from Seattle's rushed downtown, relief and determination mixed in my chest. I swung the door open and was greeted by familiar comforts, the soft hum of my ancient heater, the light flicker of my desk lamp, and, of course, my savings jar perched proudly on the shelf next to my favorite family heirloom, a faded photo of happier times. I stared at that jar, remembering every sacrifice, every skipped latte, every extra hour at work that had filled it with hope. And now it stood as a testament to my independence, a prize I wasn't about to surrender, no matter what family drama awaited. In a bid to salvage some semblance of familial connection, I decided to call my parents. Cradling the phone against my ear while pacing my living room, I tried reasoning with them. Mom, Dad, I understand Chloe has had a rough time, but I can't possibly fund a $20,000 cruise. I've worked too hard to save up for this apartment. I'm really sorry, but I have to stick to my own plans. The response was immediate and brutal. My father's clipped voice came through the line. Ellen, you're not understanding. Chloe's divorce left her with enough debt to sink a ship. We've been covering her expenses for months with money from the bakery. It's time you prove your family by helping her out. My mother's voice followed, laced with disappointment. Family should come first. You're being selfish. The words hit me like a cold, harsh Seattle drizzle. Selfish? I'd sacrificed more than anyone to secure my future, yet here they were demanding that I throw it away for Chloe's reckless whims. It wasn't just about money, it was about control, about the way they manipulated every situation to force me into compliance. I sighed deeply, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not abandoning Chloe, but I'm not sacrificing my future either. You know I've been careful with every dollar. I barely got a chance to finish before the line went dead. I sank down onto my worn-out couch, feeling the sting of their guilt and the weight of their expectations. I wasn't sure whether to feel liberated or violated. The truth was, it was a bit of both. The next morning, desperate for some comfort and clarity, I met up with Ryan at our favorite Seattle coffee shop near the waterfront. The space was warm and inviting, with large windows offering views of ferries drifting along the Puget Sound and rain softly tapping the panes. Ryan, a supportive coworker with a knack for practical advice and a healthy skepticism of family drama, immediately noticed my dampened spirit. "Rough night, Ellen?" Ryan asked, his tone gentle yet laced with genuine concern as he handed me a steaming latte. I forced a sarcastic smile. Rough? Let's just say I got disowned over a $20,000 cruise. Apparently, being an accountant and saving up for an apartment isn't family enough in their eyes. Ryan leaned back, waving a dismissive hand. You know how these families are. They thrive on control and guilt trips. I had to cut off some of my relatives myself because they'd try to drain my bank account with their drama. Don't let them use you as their cash cow. As we sipped our coffee, Ryan recounted his own experiences with toxic relatives and how he eventually set boundaries to protect his sanity. He then brought up something I'd been noticing for a while. Have you looked at Chloe's social media lately? She's been posting pics of herself at fancy restaurants and flaunting designer bags. It's like she's trying to convince the world she's broke when obviously she's living large. That comment struck a nerve. Of course, Chloe had a flair for the dramatic, even in hardship. I pulled out my phone to scroll through her feed. Sure enough, there were photos of a smiling Chloe draped in luxurious scarves, standing in trendy boutiques, and dining at places I'd only seen in glossy magazines. A bitter laugh escaped me. A $20,000 cruise for emotional recovery? Why not just buy a yacht while she's at it? Ryan's eyes crinkled with sympathy. Listen, Ellen, you need to watch out. Family drama can be a trap. You're already showing them that you're independent. Don't let their manipulations pull you back into their web. Before I could respond further, a knock sounded at my apartment door. I opened it to find Chloe, disheveled and teary-eyed, her expensive designer jacket contrasting sharply with the rain-soaked streets outside. "Ellen, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling as if every word were a confession. "I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad have cut me off after your stupid refusal, and I'm desperate. Can I please move in with you for a little while? I promise I'll be a good roommate." My heart pounded in my chest as I looked into her eyes. There was an undeniable glimmer of vulnerability amid the usual selfishness, a momentary crack in her facade that hinted at genuine distress. Yet, I couldn't ignore everything I'd seen on her social media or the way our parents' manipulations had turned her into someone who seemed to live for attention and excess. I hesitated, recalling the sacred sanctity of my savings jar and the future that jar represented. Still, the thought of leaving her out in the cold tugged at my conscience. "All right, Chloe," I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. "You can stay for a while, but just until you get back on your feet. I'm not doing this because I'm picking up the slack for the family. I'm doing this because you're my sister. But I have to warn you, my apartment is my safe space, and I'm not going to tolerate any more surprises when it comes to money." Chloe's eyes shimmered with gratitude as she mumbled a promise. "I won't let you down, Ellen." For a moment, I almost believed her. I invited her in, trying to hide my conflicted feelings behind a mask of reluctant hospitality. As the day turned into evening, I busied myself with mundane tasks, checking my emails at my desk, glancing at the savings jar that represented years of hard work, and planning meals to stretch my budget further. Meanwhile, Chloe settled into my spare room, tossing her flashy designer clothes across the neatly made bed, as though they were trophies of a life I had never known. It all seemed so out of place in my refuge of modesty and simplicity. Later that night, after the city had quieted under a persistent drizzle, I crept into the living room to grab a book and unwind. The soft hum of the heater and the occasional patter of rain outside made for a calm atmosphere, until I started hearing hushed voices. Pausing, I listened as footsteps shuffled down the hall toward the living room. Concern prickled my skin. Straining to catch words in the dim lamplight, I heard Chloe's voice, barely above a whisper. "Don't worry, I'll borrow some money from Ellen's savings. She'll never notice." The tone was conspiratorial, and it sent a chill down my spine despite the warmth of my safe space. I pressed myself against the doorway, heart pounding as I struggled to make sense of her words. Was this a joke, or was it the bitter truth that my treasured savings jar was about to be violated? My mind raced. Had Chloe, who had begged to be let in as a vulnerable, lost soul, really planned on robbing me blind? I recalled her lavish Instagram posts, the designer accessories, and the carefree attitude that belied earlier pleas. Everything now pointed to the same disturbing narrative. Chloe's financial irresponsibility wasn't a temporary setback. It was a calculated lifestyle that now threatened to undermine my hard-earned independence. I barely dared breathe as I lingered in the doorway, torn between confronting her immediately or gathering more evidence before breaking the tenuous peace of the night. The sound of her hushed conversation with someone on the phone continued, each whispered syllable carving a deeper sense of betrayal into my heart. The very idea that someone I once believed in, someone who should have been family, would stoop so low as to steal from me was devastating. I knew that I had to decide quickly how to handle this new revelation. Was I ready to face yet another layer of deceit, or could I find a way to salvage what little remained of our relationship without sacrificing my future? With every passing second, the stakes grew higher, and the once trusted boundaries of our sisterhood began to crumble. My mind whirled with possibilities as I quietly retreated back to my room, the sound of Chloe's continued whispers echoing down the hall. The image of my savings jar, once a symbol of triumph, now took on a sinister hue, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, shattering the fragile peace I had fought so hard to create. In the silence of that rainy Seattle night, standing on the precipice of betrayal and heartbreak, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. What would I do next? Would I confront her, risking further fracture in our already broken family, or would I try to keep my guard up and protect what was rightfully mine? And then, as the whispers faded into an unnerving quiet, one thought seared through my mind. What dark secrets lay hidden behind Chloe's gentle facade, and how far would she go before I was left with nothing at all? I woke up the next morning to the relentless patter of Seattle rain against my window, a reminder that even the sky couldn't stop the storm brewing inside me. As I sipped my weak coffee in my modest apartment, I couldn't shake the memory of last night. I had been haunted by the sound of Chloe's hushed conversation, her voice, laced with conspiratorial intent, saying, "Don't worry, I'll borrow some money from Ellen's savings. She'll never notice." My heart pounded as I replayed those words, the weight of betrayal settling over me like a heavy blanket. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I shuffled over to my desk where my cherished savings jar sat. That jar had witnessed years of sacrifice, a symbol of every skipped extra latte and every overtime hour clocked down at work. I'd counted its contents the night before and had a clear idea of what to expect. Yet this morning, with trembling hands, I emptied the jar onto the table and began counting aloud. My breath hitched when I discovered the total was roughly $100 less than I'd calculated. My mind raced. Had I miscounted? Or was it something far more sinister? I couldn't let the doubt fester. My trust in Chloe, once pure and unconditional, was crumbling before my eyes. I needed a way to protect what was mine and ensure no one could tamper with my future again. So, I drove down to the local electronics store near Pike Place Market and purchased a small, password-protected safe. The sleek, metallic object felt like a fortress in my trembling hands. Once home, I carefully transferred the savings jar's contents into the safe. Watching the money get locked away filled me with a bitter satisfaction. It was one more boundary I was drawing between my hard-earned independence and the manipulators in my family. Still shaken, I decided to reach out to Ryan again. I met him later that morning at our usual Seattle coffee shop, a cozy space with exposed brick walls and large windows framing the misty waterfront. Over steaming cups of coffee, I recounted every detail of the previous night. The chilling text from Mom, Chloe's impassioned plea to move in, and now the missing money from my sacred savings jar. Ryan leaned forward, his expression turning serious as he said, "Ellen, it's not just about the cruise or your apartment. There's something off about the way your family handles money. I've seen enough toxic family dynamics to know that you're being used as a safety net." He paused before adding, "Have you looked into the bakery's financial records? I remember you mentioned something about unpaid loans and debts tied to Chloe." Intrigued and alarmed, I pulled up recent public records on my laptop right there amidst the aroma of espresso and fresh pastries. My pulse quickened as I discovered that our family bakery in Pike Place Market was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. There were numerous unpaid loans all conveniently marked under Chloe's name. The more I read, the more it seemed that my parents had been using my dependable earnings and saving habits to patch up Chloe's reckless spending. The realization cut deep. I had become the unwitting scapegoat for their financial mismanagement, a pawn in their twisted scheme to bail out Chloe no matter the cost. The bitter irony stung. Here I was, living in my carefully acquired fortress of independence, while my family continued their pattern of favoritism toward Chloe. I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let this continue. I resolved to confront my parents and demand some honest answers. With a pounding heart, I arranged a family meeting at my parents' house that very afternoon. The sky was a dull, leaden gray as I drove back to Capitol Hill. The tension inside me was palpable, a mixture of dread and resolve. When I arrived, the atmosphere in the house was already charged. My parents sat stiffly in the living room, and Chloe hovered near the doorway, her makeup too perfect, her designer jacket almost mocking in its gaudy luxury. I took a deep breath and began, "I've been doing some thinking and some research, too. I know about the bakery's loans and how the money has been cleared with my help time and again. I'm not here to play the sacrificial lamb. I deserve to know what's really been going on. My father's eyes narrowed, and my mother's expression contorted with a mix of anger and hurt. Ellen, you're being ungrateful, my mother snapped. We've only done this for the sake of family. You know how Chloe's been struggling ever since her divorce. Your money has been the only thing keeping her afloat. Chloe's voice, sweet yet accusatory, cut through the tension. You're just jealous, Ellen. Jealous because you think you're so responsible, so different. You've always had a fresh start, while I've been left to pick up the pieces. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. But it was gone as quickly as it came. You're accusing me of selfishness, but look at the facts, I countered, my tone growing firmer. I've seen the records. You've been running up debts under your name, and Mom and Dad have been using my hard-earned money to cover them up. And now, I hear rumors that you've been taking extra money from my savings, too. I paused, searching their faces for any sign of remorse. Is that true? Chloe's eyes widened, and my mother burst into a flurry of defensiveness. That's absurd. You're misremembering, Ellen. You must have miscounted your savings. I wasn't convinced. The room's tension grew heavier, and lightning seemed to flash in my mind as I listened to their desperate denials. In the midst of the argument, my parents' voices escalated, and the conversation spiraled into hostility. My father's final words were as cold as the Seattle drizzle outside. If you can't support your sister, then you're no longer a part of this family. I felt the shock of those words like a physical blow, but I refused to let their manipulation break me. Hurting but resolute, I stood up to leave, my heart pounding with both sorrow and anger. As I gathered my things, I caught sight of Chloe's designer handbag carelessly tossed on the couch. I hesitated. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the urge to understand her hidden motivations gnawed at me. In a moment of impulsive anger and desperation, I unzipped the bag and rifled through its contents. Tucked in a side pocket of the bag, I found a folded document. My hands trembled as I carefully unfolded it. It was a financial statement, replete with numbers, dates, and forged signatures. The document outlined transactions that had no business being associated with the bakery. It hinted at a larger scam, a manipulation of our family's finances that implicated not only Chloe, but also the very foundation of our parents' business. My stomach churned as I realized the implications. Was my sister behind all of this? Had Chloe orchestrated a scam to siphon money from the bakery, using me as her backup plan? Or was someone even darker at play? I slipped the incriminating document into my pocket, as if it were a lifeline. Each step I took toward the door felt fraught with the burden of a truth too heavy to bear. I could hear my parents' voices in the distance, still entrenched in their bitter bickering, oblivious to the evidence of betrayal I now held in my trembling hands. As I reached the front door, the wind howled outside, mimicking the tempest inside me. I paused, listening not just to the storm, but to the faint echoes of another conversation from deeper within the house. Had there been more secrets whispered in the shadows? Was this the tip of an iceberg that could finally free me from the toxic control of my family, or utterly destroy what remained? I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped out into the bleak Seattle afternoon, leaving behind a home that had once meant family and love, but now reeked of greed, favoritism, and betrayal. My heart raced as I clutched the document tightly in my pocket, the weight of its implications sinking in. Back in my apartment, safe and alone with only my thoughts and the persistent hum of the city, I couldn't help but replay every moment of that meeting. So, I'm the selfish one, I muttered to myself with a bitter laugh, the one who saves her money while Chloe plays the victim with a designer bag on her arm. The sarcasm stung, a flicker of my old resilience in the face of injustice. I sat at my small dining table and pulled out the document again, examining the cryptic financial figures and clearly altered signatures. It was as if each forged line revealed layers of deceit, mapping out a scandal that extended far beyond a mere sibling squabble. My mind raced with questions. How deep did this scam go? Who was benefiting from our family's financial misery? And more disturbingly, was there anyone else in this tangled web of lies? As thunder rumbled ominously outside, I knew one thing for certain. I was at a crossroads. I could either let this bitter betrayal consume me, or I could use it to finally break free of the toxic chains that had bound my family for far too long. The decision was agonizing, but the evidence in my hand was undeniable. This was my chance to uncover the truth and reclaim my independence once and for all. My heart felt heavy with the risk of destroying what little was left of my family, but also light with the promise of truth and freedom. I wondered how far Chloe's manipulation would go if left unchecked, and whether exposing the scam would shatter the illusion of the family I once believed in or liberate us all from its suffocating grip. In that charged silence, as the storm outside intensified like the turmoil inside me, one thought echoed louder than all the doubts. I had a choice to make, one that could either save me or completely break me. And as I stared out at the rain-soaked city, I realized that the real test was just beginning. What dark secrets lay hidden behind my family's carefully constructed facade, and how much more betrayal awaited me. Back in the quiet of her apartment that stormy evening, I spread out the forged financial statement on my dining table. The document, crinkled from being hidden away in Chloe's designer handbag, was a sordid mosaic of numbers, falsified signatures, and suspicious transactions. The description was damning. It detailed a series of withdrawals from our family bakery's funds, withdrawals that, according to the record, Chloe had authorized. My pulse pounded as I reread each line, struggling to comprehend how my own sister could betray our family's trust so brazenly. I knew I couldn't tackle this alone. I called Ryan, my reliable coworker and friend, who had already offered his support twice in this unfolding drama. We arranged to meet at a nearby cafe a few blocks from my apartment. The city was already darkening into a typical Seattle dusk, the skyline blurred by rain and neon reflections from wet pavement. Over steaming cups of coffee, I spread my evidence out on the table and explained everything: the missing money, the forged signatures, the alarming detail that the bakery's loans were mostly under Chloe's name. Ryan frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Ellen, this is huge," he said softly. "It looks like Chloe's been forging signatures to siphon money from the bakery, money that your parents have been desperately using to keep the business alive. And it all ties back to you, because they've been covering for her with your funds, too." His voice was low, a mixture of astonishment and concern. "I know how much that savings jar meant to you. Every dollar in it was part of your promise to yourself. And now it's all being used as a safety net for her reckless needs." I let out a bitter laugh, trying to mask the sting of betrayal. I guess Chloe's idea of an emergency is a new handbag, while I'm here trying to keep a roof over my head. The sarcasm barely concealed my inner agony. That afternoon, after Ryan left with a promise to help me dig into more of the bakery's records online, I decided I couldn't wait for things to spiral any further. I needed answers, and I needed to confront Chloe directly. I returned to my apartment determined to get to the truth. I waited until dusk, when the storm outside reached its crescendo, the rain drumming fiercely against my windows, echoing the turmoil inside me. Approaching the living room, I caught Chloe in the middle of another phone call. I froze at the doorway, my heart sinking as I listened. I heard her dismissively say, "Yes, I know. I'll just dip into Ellen's savings again. Don't worry, it's only a little money." The words were barely audible over the sound of wind howling outside, but they were enough, a final confirmation that my worst fears were true. I stepped forward, clearing my throat sharply. "Chloe, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging both outside and in my heart. She ended her call abruptly, turning to me with wide, innocent eyes that quickly melted into feigned sorrow. Ellen, I didn't want you to find out this way, she stammered, clutching her designer scarf as if it were a lifeline. But there was no remorse here, only a practice performance. Save it, I snapped, anger rising steadily. I know about the missing money from my savings jar and those extra charges on my credit card. You've racked up at least $500 on luxury items without even asking me. I felt the presence of every sacrifice etched into that precious savings jar, now empty, but still symbolic of years of struggle and independence. Chloe's eyes darted away momentarily, and then she said in a dismissive tone, "It was just an emergency, Ellen. I needed to buy a new outfit, so I could look presentable. You wouldn't understand. You're always so serious about every penny." Her tone dripped with entitlement and indifference. I hardly recognized the sister who sat before me. The person who once looked up to me, who used to laugh together during lazy summer afternoons in our childhood home, now seemed a stranger entirely, tangled in her own reckless priorities. I took a step closer, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "I'm done being your ATM and your scapegoat. I'm not going to let you, or anyone else in this family, drain what I've worked so hard for." Without another word, I turned and walked straight to the door, slamming it behind me. At that moment, I realized that I couldn't allow Chloe to keep intruding on the life I was building for myself. I changed the locks on my apartment door that very night, resolutely cutting off the possibility of her sneaking back in to steal my security. I texted her one final message: "You're not welcome here. Don't try to contact me." I sent it, knowing full well that this would only widen the rift between us, but it was a necessary step for my own survival. The following day, determined to secure my future once and for all, I drove to the real estate office downtown to finalize the purchase of my apartment. I sat in the sterile yet surprisingly comforting lobby, the resolve inside me steadying as I signed the papers. Outside the window, Seattle's skyline glowed against a darkening sky, and as I looked back at my new apartment, I felt a mix of triumph and poignant loneliness swirl within me. I'd made it on my own, built my own safe haven, yet the price had been my family's love, or what little remained of it. My savings jar, now emptied into the safe that guarded my future, sat silently on my desk. It was a bittersweet reminder of every sacrifice I had made and every betrayal that had led me here. Later that day, while I was unpacking a few boxes in the quiet solitude of my new apartment, my phone began to ring. It was my parents', desperate tones laced with pleas that I'd heard before. "Ellen, please, think about Chloe," my mother begged over the phone, her voice unexpectedly timid. "We need you. We can work something out." My father echoed the sentiment, insisting that family meant sticking together, even in hard times. But I was done. I answered with a cool detachment that surprised even me. "I'm sorry, but I won't be manipulated into bailing you out anymore. I'm no longer part of this scheme. I'm forging my own future now." Their voices faltered, but then, as always, quickly resumed their accusations. "You're heartless," they said. "You're abandoning us." But I couldn't care less anymore. That evening, after a long day of signing papers and packing up memories, I returned to my new apartment. Exhausted yet determined, I slowly unpacked my few belongings, placing my cherished items on shelves and each one whispering faint echoes of my newfound independence. My apartment, though modest, was entirely mine, an oasis in a city that thrived on rain and reinvention. As I sorted through a box of old letters and keepsakes near the window, the glow of Seattle's skyline at dusk filled the room with a gentle, melancholic light. Just as I settled into this small haven, I noticed something peculiar by the front door. There, lying on the polished hardwood floor, was an envelope I hadn't seen before. It was plain, unmarked by any handwriting, but the paper itself was of a quality that spoke of deliberate selection. My heart skipped a beat as I slowly picked it up and turned it over in my hands. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The message inside sent a chill down my spine. You've only seen the surface. Your parents knew more than you think. The truth about the bakery scam is only the beginning. Look deeper. I stared at the letter, my throat tight with shock and disbelief. Who had sent it? And what deeper secrets lay hidden behind our family's facade? The letter hinted at layers of betrayal that stretched beyond Chloe's theft, suggesting that our parents were complicit, or even the masterminds, behind the financial chaos at the bakery. In that moment, standing alone in my dimly lit, rain-soaked apartment with Seattle's lights blinking in the distance, I felt the full weight of what had just transpired. I had fought hard to carve out my own space in this world, to protect my future and assert my value, but now it seemed that the conspiracy ran even deeper than I ever imagined. My mind raced as I clutched the anonymous letter. Had I truly been the only victim of this deceit, or was I now standing on the precipice of an even more explosive family secret? I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't ignore this revelation. I had to find out what my parents were hiding, what other betrayals lay in wait to shatter the remnants of my broken family. As thunder rolled softly in the distance and the rain continued its steady symphony outside, I realized that my journey was far from over. The safe in which I had locked away my hard-earned savings now seemed like a fragile barrier against an even larger storm of lies. I wondered if exposing the truth would ultimately set me free, or if it would drag me deeper into a labyrinth of betrayal. What dark secrets have my parents been concealing, and will uncovering them finally free me, or destroy everything I fought for? I sat alone in my new apartment, the soft hum of the heater mingling with the distant sound of Seattle's ferries as I stared at the anonymous letter pinned to my wall. The simple, unadorned envelope had rattled me to the core. Its cryptic message, "You've only seen the surface. Your parents knew more than you think," was a challenge I could not ignore. Determined to uncover the full truth, I contacted Ryan immediately. Over the phone, his calm yet urgent tone reassured me. "Ellen, we need to dig deeper. I have a feeling that this letter is just the tip of a very dark iceberg." Within hours, Ryan and I combed through every scrap of public record, bank statements, and news articles related to our family bakery in Pike Place Market. The evidence was damning. Not only had Chloe been forging signatures to siphon funds, but it also turned out that our parents had been aware of her blatant financial manipulation. In an effort to keep the bakery afloat and the family's reputation unblemished, they'd quietly funneled money from the business into covering her mounting debts. The strategy had backfired spectacularly. Public records now showed that the bakery was on the verge of collapse, with significant unpaid loans registered under Chloe's name. As Ryan explained the details, my hands trembled. Our family, once famed for its lovingly made breads and pastries, had become a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. Determined to confront the rotten core of our family secrets, I decided to arrange one final showdown with my parents. With the forged financial statement and the anonymous letter in my possession, I drove back to their house on Capitol Hill. The sky was overcast and sporadic rain drizzled down, a perfect mirror to the mood that weighed on me. Stepping through the front door felt like walking into a den of suppressed regrets and secrets. I could sense that something monumental was about to unfold. In the dimly lit living room, my parents sat stoically, while Chloe slumped on the worn-out sofa in an all-too-familiar display of vulnerability mixed with defiance. I cleared my throat, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have something to ask," I began, holding up the financial statement and the letter as silent evidence. "Explain to me how our family bakery ended up on the brink of bankruptcy. How is it that almost every dollar meant for the business was redirected to cover Chloe's debts? And why did you choose to hide her forgery instead of being honest about it?" My father's face reddened with a mixture of anger and shame. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she reached for a tissue, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "Ellen, you don't understand," my father snarled, his tone defensive. We did what was necessary to protect the family. We never wanted scandal. Chloe's mistakes were our burden. Chloe, no longer able to hide behind manufactured sorrow, burst out. I never meant for any of this to happen. You always favored me. I was left to fend for myself, so I did what I had to do. Her voice cracked with emotion, but her eyes were cold, calculating. I listened to every word, my heart aching with betrayal and sorrow. So, you admit it, I said bitterly. You allowed me to be your safety net. You used my money to cover for your irresponsibility and then hid the truth behind forged documents and empty promises. And you, Mom and Dad, you knew all along and chose silence over truth. There was a long, painful pause. Finally, my mother spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. We thought we were protecting you, protecting the family name. We never wanted to burden you. I shook my head, incredulous at the extent of their manipulation. Protect me? You drained my savings so you could keep your precious bakery afloat and let Chloe escape accountability. I have worked harder than you can imagine just to build a life for myself in this city, and now you expect me to stand by and finance your cover-up. I paused, forcing the words out. I'm done. I'm not going to fix your mistakes anymore. The room fell into a heavy silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of thunder outside. My parents' expressions were a mix of despair, anger, and resignation. Chloe's eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape route, her facade finally cracking under the weight of her deception. Drawing upon every ounce of strength I had, I laid down my terms. I'm offering one thing, though. I will help you, temporarily, by connecting you with a financial advisor who can help restructure your debts. But make no mistake, I'm not bailing you out. This is your problem to fix. I'm done being manipulated. I'm building my own life now, free from this toxic cycle. My father's voice was hoarse as he muttered, You're heartless, Ellen. My mother cried softly, Please, Ellen. We only did what we thought was best. But I could no longer hear them over the steady beat of my own resolve. After that painful confrontation, the consequences began to unfold rapidly. Within days, news broke that the bakery had collapsed into bankruptcy. Ryan later called me with a somber tone. Ellen, Chloe has fled Seattle. There are rumors that she's trying to avoid legal consequences for her part in the scam. The words stung, yet strangely, they also freed me. I wasn't shocked. Chloe's pattern of self-destruction had always been predictable. The collapse of the bakery sealed the fate of my parents' misguided attempts to hide their family secrets. In the wake of all this chaos, I found solace in my new beginning. I began to immerse myself in the community I had built around my apartment, a vibrant network of friends, supportive colleagues, and local business owners who valued honesty and integrity. One evening, I received an invitation to speak at a community event held near the waterfront. The venue was set against Seattle's calm night sky, its reflective waters a stark contrast to the stormy past I had left behind. Standing in front of a diverse audience of local residents, entrepreneurs, and even a few old friends, I took a deep breath and began my speech. My worth isn't tied to their approval, I declared firmly, echoing a line from an old journal I had kept as a child. It's in the life I build for myself. I spoke about resilience, independence, and the courage to set boundaries, urging everyone to stand up against toxic familial dynamics and embrace personal accountability. The audience responded with warm applause, and for the first time in months, I felt truly seen and supported. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I arranged my few treasured belongings and placed my now empty savings jar on a prominent shelf. It wasn't filled with money anymore, but it remained a powerful symbol of my journey, from the days of scrimping and saving, through the betrayal, and finally to the hard-won freedom of independence. The jar represented sacrifice, endurance, and ultimately, self-respect. As I sat down at my desk, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had faced a family that expected unconditional submission, and instead, I had reclaimed my power. I cut ties with deception, established firm boundaries, and found a supportive community that valued me for who I was, not for the money I could provide or the loyalty I was expected to show. Just when I thought I had closed this painful chapter, a final surprise awaited me. While unpacking boxes in my new living room, I discovered yet another envelope tucked between old letters on a shelf, a letter with no return address. My hands shook as I opened it, and inside I found a short, cryptic note. "This isn't over. Our family's secrets run deeper than you know." My heart pounded as I read those words, the final twist hanging in the air like a question mark over everything I had fought so hard to escape. Would this be the start of a new battle, or would it finally close the book on the toxic legacy of my family? For now, I chose to focus on the present, the community I was building, the life I was creating, and the unyielding strength I had discovered within myself. I set the letter aside, determined that nothing would pull me back into the past. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes and embraced the peace of the Seattle night outside my window, a night where the storm had passed, leaving behind a calm that mirrored the resolve growing in my heart. As I settled into this new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a fierce optimism about the future. I had learned that true strength comes not from clinging to doomed bonds, but from forging your own path, no matter how lonely it might seem at first. What would you do if your family betrayed you? Share your story in the comments.